The rose, an emblem of pure innocence, of beauty, vital power. And of romance. Roses are graceful, sublime, and well-armed. Is this the real secret of irresistible attraction? Roses are dreams of visionary breeders come true. There are more than 30,000 breeds to this day. In our gardens, these grafted artificial gems blend back into nature. For millennia, roses have touched the minds of men, seduced their souls. Sappho, the Greek poetess, wrote, "If the gods were to coronate a queen of flowers, the rose would wear the crown." From early spring onward, plants of the rose family bring delight to our gardens. On first sight, apple and pear trees have little in common with roses. Yet like cherries, plums, blackberries and strawberries, they belong to the vast family of the Rosaceae. If you put an apple blossom side by side with the blossom of a wild rose, the relationship is obvious. The difference, however, has been described by the German poet Goethe. Roses inspire rhymes, apples, appetite. At the Baden Rosarium near Vienna, the oriental cherry, a cousin of the rose, is the first messenger of spring. The actual roses are only just awakening from hibernation. Carefully, the gardeners prepare the beds for their summer splendor. The first signs of life are strong red shoots. While rose enthusiasts in Central Europe have to exercise patience, the roses in southern France are already in full bloom. Halfway between Nice and Marseille is Les Lucs, home of the legendary Maillon-Richardier breeding plantation. Its vast fields boast thousands of still nameless beauties. Which of them will make it to the market depends on one man, Jacques Mouchotte. Since 1978, all Maillon roses have gone through his hands. He is regarded as one of the world's most successful breeders of modern roses. Jacques is passionate about creating new breeds. Just like his mentors in the House of Maillon, a sixth-generation family business. Francis Maillon, grandfather of the present junior boss, laid the foundation of the company's global reputation. In the 1930s, he bred a rose coded 33540.
Francis Maillon, der Züchter, die berühmte Züchter.
Back in 1938, Francis Maillon, the famous breeder, realized that this was an outstanding rose. Immediately, he sent a few testing buds to Germany and Italy.
Nach Deutschland geschickt und nach Italien geschickt.
In addition, Francis Maillon managed to ship these breeding buds to his American partner Robert Pyle, even though World War II had already begun. Years later, Pyle sent back a joyful message. "This rose is a world success. We will call it Peace." Not only the perfect breed is sensational, its history too is extraordinary. It was given its name on April 29, 1945, the day of the fall of Berlin. In the same year, peace was handed to all participants of the United Nations Founding Conference. The sprout, numbered 3, 35, 40, wrote world history, and thanks to Robert Pyle, it changed the life of Frances Maillon.
Während der Kriegszeit hat viele die Rose verkauft und alle die Lizenzgebühren.
During the war, Pyle sold many roses and parked the license fees in behalf of Frances Maillon. When the war had ended, he came to France with 2 presents for Frances Maillon:
Nach Frankreich gekommen mit 2 sehr schöne Geschenke für
a
Frances
Cadillac and a suitcase full of dollars.
Und das zweite Mal ein Koffer mit viele Dollar.
Robert Pyle's dollars enabled Frances Maillon to fully concentrate on creating new rose breeds and abandon the profane business of mass production. Peace did not only make an impression in America. In Italy, it was named Gioia, joy. The Germans called it Gloria Dei, divine glory.
Das ist die einzige schriftliche Kopie von die.
This is the only copy of Frances Maillon's famous black binder. It contains everything that mattered to Louisette and Frances.
Alle wichtige Sachen von Louisette und Francis.
When peace was registered, its future success was not foreseen. Like all other breeds, the divine peace rose is described in just a single line. To make the confusion complete, it is registered as Madame A. Maillon. Francis chose that name in remembrance of his mother. The bottom column lists the ancestors of peace. The family tree of peace includes grand names. It reads like a time journey through the history of rose breeding. The peace rose shares its earliest ancestors with all other cultural breeds. All of them come from wild roses. In Europe, the most common wild species is Rosa canina, the dog rose. It bears blossoms once a year in early spring. In autumn and winter, its rose hips bring a bright red to the landscape. If its young shoots are not regularly eaten by livestock, it tends to sprawl across pastures. In protected locations, the dog rose will form an impenetrable coppice, a safe haven for nesting birds. But often, what looks like a bird's nest is in fact a tumor-like growth of the rose. These gall nuts are caused by insects. Their secretions trigger a process of abnormal cell division in the plant, forcing it to build winter quarters for gall wasp larvae. Inside the gall nut, they form a pupa. When the weather gets warm, the fully developed wasps emerge from the pupal shell. In olden days, gall nuts were believed to enhance sleep. In some regions, it was called sleeping apple. In others, rose fungus or rose king. To fully unfold their splendor, wild roses need space. Roses are granted space galore in Giovanni's garden in Graz, Austria. 15 years ago, this was barren land. Now it's home to several hundred rare trees and 1,200 rose species from across the world. The twin sisters Eva Kotzmuth and Sonja Grinchkel chose this place to make their dream come true. They left everything behind, bought 2.5 hectares of hillside, built a house, and began to plant.
Das war für uns immer klar.
The twins, Eva says, were always clear about this. No new car, no new kitchen, no new painting on the wall, just plants, plants, plants. In the first year, hundreds of trees and shrubs were planted. In the second year, they were all shifted around. The twins discovered their love of roses in England. Their favourites are old breeds and wild roses. In no time at all, the two absorbed a great deal of expertise, including the international language of botany. For a layman, it takes a while to get accustomed to rose Latin. Eva gets excited about her favourites. Wild roses, Rosa Domalis from Italy with tender purple flowers. Californica plena from America, Eva loves its red branches in winter. And here from China, Rosa holodantha. Eva compares its big shiny petals to Chinaware. Here we have Rosa Roxburghi and Roxburghi normalis. The bloom is almost finished. Up here, our native Rosa multiflora, a real feast for bees. Bumblebees and honeybees prefer wild roses with their simple flowers of 5 petals. Double flowers are the fancy of gardeners. By systematic selection, roses can be manipulated to replace pollen leaves with petals. During the Middle Ages, Crusaders brought the Damask Rose, a discreetly double-flowered breed from Asia Minor to Europe. The Damask Rose is the embodiment of the old rose. The Damask, or Tudor rose, is known for its fragrance. For 300 years, it has been harvested to make perfumes. The cabbage rose group includes the moss rose. On first sight, its buds seem to be infested by aphids. A closer look reveals that these are, in fact, oil glands. The deeper you delve in the world of roses, the more surprising is the fact that all this diversity comes from just a handful of wild species. The doorway to modern breeds was pushed open by roses from China. They came to Europe via India on 18th century tea vessels. These tea roses added new colors and the ability to blossom several times a year. Crossbreeding with tea roses led to the creation of remontant roses, the very first roses to grow flower buds after the main bloom. Today, in many gardens, the old remontant roses see a renaissance.
This
gorgeous remontant rose is a German Urt. Remontant roses will grow to a maximum height of 1.5 meters. This one is an exception. It seems so happy here that it has reached about 2 meters. Remontants are the link between old and modern roses. They were bred until 1920. The influence of Chinese roses revolutionized Europe's rose gardens, but the new splendor came at a price, a diminished resistance to frost. Paradoxically, this weakness only enhanced the rose's aristocratic air. Only the rich had winter gardens. In Baden, near Vienna, parks and roses have been cultivated for over 200 years. Baden's sprawling parks are the pride of the town. Here, Austria's largest rose garden was planted in the late 1960s. Hidden among a wealth of flowers is a rarity that's usually overlooked by visitors. La France, allegedly the first modern rose. This bush is obviously suffering, demonstrating the sensitive nature of tea hybrids and early floribunda roses. The proud shrub roses of the Austro-Hungarian breeder Rudolf Geschwind are faring much better. Geschwind envisioned a combination of the beauty and blooming power of tea hybrids with the robustness of old breeds.
This
is a great democratic merit of Rudolf Geschwind, making tea roses accessible to a wide public by making them frost resistant. Tea hybrids could now be planted in the open by anyone.
For
a long time, Geschwind's roses went unnoticed. Meanwhile, the Rose City of Baden built him a monument. Gerhard Weber, head of the city gardens, keeps his memory alive. One of his breeds declares its frost resistance in its German name, literally Northland, a fragrant shrub rose. Another famous breed of his is the Salot Teplitz, named after his hometown. To this day, the Salot Teplitz is often crossed with other breeds because of its superior qualities. Rudolf Geschwind, imperial forestry engineer, bred more than 2,000 rose species. 48 of these can be admired at the Baden Rose Garden. Geschwind wrote a botanical standard work. In it, back in 1864, he described systematic crossbreeding as the only way forward. In the same year, the Augustine monk Gregor Mendel published his theory of genetics. Thanks to China roses, a profusion of new breeds was created, with one flower per stem, vivid hues and extreme blooming power. The best example is peace.
Diese Rose war eine echte Revolution in der Rosenwelt.
According to Jacques Mouchot, the peace rose revolutionized the world of roses, combining striking colors and beautiful leaves with a remarkable immunity against diseases. This rose is able to grow in France, America, Germany, Italy, anywhere in the world. Such roses, Jacques points out, are very rare even today.
Und heute noch Rosen, die das machen können, sind sehr, sehr selten.
In contrast to many creations of her day, peace is a robust beauty. She meets visitors with her head held high. As long as there is an abundance of nectar, the gardeners need not fear this guest. Allegedly, rose beetles will eat the entire flower. The truth is that the beetle only comes for the sweet nectar, just like the bees. If it gets enough nectar, it will leave the flower alone. Breeding roses is science and passion. In 1968, the World Federation of Rose Societies was formed. It awards extraordinary new breeds. Naturally, the very first breed to receive the title of World Rose was Peace. In 2006, the title went to Eden. This young, nostalgia-style World Rose was named Schloss Herberstein in Austria. In 1996, this garden was also awarded the Rosetto Botanico Carlo Fineschi in Tuscany. Professor Gianfranco Fineschi planted his first rose bushes more than 40 years ago. Today, his rosarium boasts 7,000 breeds.
È l'unica maniera.
The only way to understand roses, says the rose enthusiast, who was Pope John Paul II's orthopedic surgeon, is by taking a time journey from roses that existed 50 million years before Homo sapiens to the most recent breeds.
Naturale, nata pochi anni fa.
A stroll through Fineschi's work of a lifetime is such a journey. The Rosetto is a living museum of roses, from wild original forms to the most extravagant modern creations.
Arrivò un inglese che disse, sì, va bene.
One day, an Englishman came along and said, "We now have flowers of many colors and roses that blossom several times a year.
Fiori.
But my roses will blossom all summer long." He stressed the value of reflowering.
Con fiori molte volte l'anno, quindi ancora più accentuato il valore della rifiorenza.
Professor Fineschi is talking of David Austin. The famous English breeder invested 20 years in breeding work before reaching a breakthrough in the 1960s. Austin's declared goal was a robust modern rose with the charm and fragrance of old roses from Grandma's garden. His so-called English roses are the modern-day equivalents of farmers' garden roses. Their hues are discreet, their petals abundant. They blossom from spring to late autumn. They need little care, are robust and fragrant. It was the return of fragrance to rose breeding. There are many different perfumes of roses, certainly more than humans can discern. Our sense of smell is limited to some 10,000 aromas. Only people with great experience can actually name these sweet smells. Professor Erich Leitner of the Department of Food Chemistry at Graz Technical University in Austria is an aroma expert. He is preparing an aroma sample of classic damask rose oil. The diluted essence is fed into a gas chromatographer, which splits up the rose oil into an array of chemical compounds. Then, the sample is heated to the point of total evaporation, so that the separate substances can rise from the separation column to the smelling port. At the smelling port, Erich Leitner is waiting for the first fragrance.
Bergamot, Geraniol, grün geschnittene Blätter.
Concentrated smelling is hard work. Even experienced noses cannot do it for longer than 10 minutes. Among experts, descriptions of smells are unambiguous.
Blattwanze, Zahnarzt, Gewürznelke, phenolisch, Pferdeschweiß, süßlich, röstig, Zuckerwatte.
In the computer, Professor Leitner can compare his results with a chemical analysis. At each peak, he should have smelled something. A characteristic rose compound is geraniol. Wherever we encounter geraniol, we are reminded of roses. As with all plants, the point of exuding fragrances is attracting insects. This only makes sense when the insects can have access to the pollen, so only fully mature blossoms will give off a smell. The distribution of smells is complex. At the outer fringe of the flower, rose alcohols attract honeybees and bumblebees. Closer to the center, the insects get into a flush of phenylethanol. Inebriated, they move on towards the center, where familiar smells like eugenol and citral are beckoning. The same flavors that are found in beehives. Stimulated by these smells, the insects wiggle around, dropping pollen of other plants and thereby pollinating the blossom. One cause of the incredible variety of roses is their tendency to mutate. Mutations are called sports, genetic modifications that may be passed on to the next generation. This may result in new colors, in bush roses turning into ramblers, or a change in the number of petals. The most unusual sport came from a China rose, the green rose. Rosa viridiflora is a mutation of old blush. An especially beautiful specimen is found at the Baden Rosarium. All parts of the viridiflora's blossoms have been changed into organs of photosynthesis. This phenomenon makes the rose seem to blossom forever. If humans want to influence the genetics of a rose, they must act like honeybees. Apart from sensitive fingers, this requires comprehensive knowledge about the genetics of particular roses and a great deal of imagination.
Meiner Meinung nach, ein Rosenzüchter ist
Jacques thinks that rose breeders are artists. A new rose begins as a dream, he says, and it takes hard work to make dreams come true.
Diese Traum zum Wahrheit zu bringen.
Over the winter, Mouchotte fiddles about with 30 new promising breeds. As soon as the blossoms open, implementation begins. Pollen is taken from the father plants and transferred to the mother plants. To prevent the interference of wind or insects, the flowers have to be covered before the pollination. Pollinated blossoms will develop rose hips. As soon as these fruits are ripe, their seeds can be planted. After that, it's a matter of waiting. One crossing will produce up to 5,000 seedlings, but only a few will satisfy the breeder. First and foremost, breeding means selection.
Hier zum Beispiel gibt's eine mit sehr
This
schönen
one has
Streifen,
beautiful orange and yellow stripes,
aber viel zu klein.
but Jacques thinks the blossom is too small.
Hier gibt's eine große Blüte.
This rose is big
mit
enough and the
Streifen,
color is
rosa
fine,
und
but it
rosa
hasn't got
Glanz.
enough petals.
Aber das geht auch nicht. Es gibt nicht genügend Blumenblätter. Und hier gibt
The
es
next
eine
one has a big enough blossom with lovely stripes, a strong plant.
schöne Streifen
That's of interest for
und
selection.
eine sehr große Pflanze. Das ist interessant. Das ist eine Selektion.
The diversity produced by the seeds of a single rosehip is incredible. But the breeder must not be distracted from his defined aim. In the second year, the selection process goes on. Again, several of nature's creations will disappear forever. Of a total of 150,000 seedlings, 10 may reach the finish line. Jacques Mouchotte spends lots of time on some of his fantasies. On Ladybug, for instance. Creating Michel Serrault took 30 years. 30 years until the spots were really perfect.
Meine erfolgreiche Rose ist die Rose, die ich morgen gezüchtet habe.
Jacques says his most successful rose is the one he'll breed tomorrow.
Man muss immer die-
As soon as a rose goes on the market, its qualities are forgotten.
nicht mehr seine
All
Qualität.
that's remembered are its shortcomings, so a breeder must never stop improving.
Weiterarbeiten und noch besser nächstes Mal zu sein.
Before a new breed is released for distribution, it is tested in rose assessment gardens in various climate locations. The Baden Rosarium runs such an assessment garden. Apart from the shape of a new rose, blossoms, fragrance, and most important, its health are monitored. From a breeder's first conception to market readiness, it usually takes about 8 years of work. Then, inconspicuous naked rose stems are sent out to licensees. The value of these 20-centimeter stems is in the buds from which the shoots will grow. On rose plantations near Vienna, roses are grown in huge numbers. To be precise, they are grafted, so that cultivated shoots will grow from a wild base. A dog rose, for instance. Grafting buds onto a robust base is an ancient technique. Its origin is as obscure as is the oldest rose. The grafters can handle 300 roses in 30 minutes. Their success rate is about 90%. When winter ends, the cultivated shoot begins to grow. Now, the base can be shed. After 1 year in the field, the grafted plants are ready for sale. Today's markets are swamped with new breeds. There are roses in any color, height of stem, climbers and shrubs suitable for any climate. Among the recent creations, a familiar rose stands out. Peace. Millions of peace plants have been sold, and they are found in any assortment. Roses are subject to fashions. and trends. One dream, dreamed by many breeders, has not quite been fulfilled. The black rose. Red plays a major role in rose breeding. The red color is produced by anthocyanins, a group of water-soluble compounds. They are produced by young shoots previous to chlorophyll and wax production. Anthocyanins protect the leaves against ultraviolet light. In some breeds, the chemistry creates a special effect.
Man erwartet eigentlich von keiner anderen Pflanze so viel wie von der
People
Rose.
expect more of roses than of any other plant.
Die soll den ganzen
Beautiful
Sommer
flowers,
blühen und
all
sie
summer
soll immer
long,
gesund
fragrance,
sein.
robust
Und das kann
health,
ja fast
a
niemand.
bit much to ask for. The roses in front of a nursery near Vienna demonstrate where the trend is going. These knockout roses from the Floribunda family are as tough as roses can get. In spring, this parking lot was flooded knee-deep. The trees died. The roses survived. This is how every rose bush at the rosarium should present itself to visitors. Immaculate, sturdy, with healthy leaves and rich blossoms. One cannot take this for granted, not in the absence of chemical pesticides. Gerhard Weber in the Baden Rosarium hopes to make do with organic pest management in the future. The main challenges are fungi such as mildew and black spot. These annoying parasites target the leaves of bred roses. In 2007, part of the rosarium was set apart as a testing area. Together with Vienna's University of Natural Resources and Applied Life Sciences, Gerhard Weber tests alternatives to classic chemical pesticides. The naked eye cannot discern the culprits. To make the fungi visible, special devices are needed. It's enough to investigate a tiny infested area of the plant. The leaf sample is scanned by an electron microscope. Physicist Rudolf Ehrlach knows how to make invisible things visible, and fungus specialist Hermann Vogelmeier can put a name to what we see. The black spot fungus has been a breeding problem since Rosa foetida was created. Its spores will quickly spread to neighboring plants and can survive in the soil until their chance comes. Quite different is the ugly face of mildew. The white rush on the leaves consists of delicate filaments, the work of sac fungi. Magnified 500 to 1,000 times, even menacing fungi such as rose rust will vie with the beauty of roses. Strolling along a garden path, the German poet and humorist Wilhelm Busch was inspired by another pest. Admiring the blushing rose, its fragrance gladdening my nose, I notice through my reading lens a tiny creature, now immense. High above ground, far from my boots, it sucks the sap from tender shoots. Though gentle, peaceful, without guile, its joy of life just lasts a while. The larva of the ladybug grabs aphids with a deadly hug. A Victorian man of letters with the observant eye of an organic gardener. Wherever aphids, fungi, and other so-called pests are tolerated, a garden can become a wildlife haven. Snakes and lizards are harmless and prefer natural gardens. The roses in Giovanni's garden have never seen pest control measures. The motto in this garden is, "The tough will survive, no matter what." Obviously, this garden is crowded with millions of very tough roses. So what's the secret of the twin sisters?
Bei uns wird nicht geschnitten, nur das alte
We don't
Holz
prune our
entfernt.
roses, Eva
Gedüngt
says.
wird nur mit
Only the dead
Varieties
wood is
ab-
removed.
ab
The only
Februar.
fertilizer
Das ist ein
is horse
Feld, zum
dung,
Beispiel ein
applied from
weites
February
Land, das
onward.
wir vor einem Grad
This part of the
gesetzt
garden
haben,
has never
der
been
nie
watered.
bewässert wurde.
After
Die
planting
Rosen
1 year
wurden
ago,
eingesetzt.
there were 2
Wir
days
haben
of
dann
rain.
hat's 2
Since
Tage
then, the
geregnet.
roses have just been
Seitdem steht sie
beautiful.
so schön da.
Roses are often described as overly sensitive plants, while in fact most of them are quite robust. The blossoms of a good breed planted in a suitable location will weather a week of rain. Real rose buffs are not just fascinated by the diversity of blossoms, they also look at leaves and thorns. Some roses are literally bristling. Others carry individual, formidable thorns. Here too, the diversity is impressive. This is a so-called wing-thorn rose, a wild species from China. Its thorns are both a defense and a decoration, and it remains colorful even after losing its blossoms. Roses that have been pruned look bare in late autumn. Wild ones now swing their hips. Itching powder, jam, or rose tea. Most Europeans cherish some sort of childhood memory of rose hips. Even though garden roses insist on well-deserved winter break, our homes are aglow with roses all year round, in the shape of cut flowers. These roses are tropical. Europe's major supplier is Kenya. In the highland of Laikipia, at the foot of Mount Kenya, roses find ideal conditions for 10 out of 12 months. Days are warm and nights are cool, around 10 degrees centigrade. In this climate, roses grow slowly and produce large blossoms. Although cut roses have been patterned after classic garden breeds, the two types have little in common. Cut roses would never survive in a garden. Their stems need to be straight. Each carries a single blossom, which remains fresh for a long time. The longer such a rose will keep, the less it smells. You can't have both. Lobelia farms try to work in an organic cycle. Most of the plant debris goes through the shredder and on the compost. The rest is eaten by livestock. The 20-hectare farm provides loving care for about 3 million roses. The sensitive cut roses are rarely treated with chemical pesticides, just in emergencies, and never preemptively. In Africa, too, pests are best kept in check by natural means. It's phytoncide mites versus spider mites. It's late afternoon when the beauties are sent on a cool journey. 1 or 2 days later, they turn up in Europe's flower shops. One day after the harvest, the Kenya roses reach Amsterdam, the world's biggest flower exchange. The Wall Street of flower trading is halfway between the airport and the city. On the premises of Flower Holland, 48 million plants are traded each day. At 4 a.m., the inspectors are on the job. They spot-check shipments to see whether the contents conform to the freight papers. If they don't, a fine is levied. Two hours later, the auction begins. In 12 halls with a total of 40 auction clocks, nerves are taut. The shipments should be sold by 10 o'clock. There's a special hall for roses. Before a trader is allowed to bid, he or she has to go through 1 year of training. Within split seconds, one container after another is sold. Then the goods are distributed to the dealers. It seems a miracle that each buyer actually gets what he's ordered, but it does work. Later that same day, the flowers are for sale at the kiosk. This gigantic trade machinery is what it takes to decorate our homes with roses in the dead of winter. So what can you do to make the treasure last? Aspirin relieves headaches, and rumour has it that it will also keep flowers fresh. The same effect is attributed to sweet soft drinks. Is that true? Our test on 3 peace roses demonstrates it isn't. The professional gardener is not surprised that the miracle brews are a hoax. What really counts is that the water conduits in the stem remain fresh and functional.
Die Rose mit Wasser versorgen, dass die frisch bleiben und leitungsfähig bleiben.
Scissors will crush a rose's capillary vessels, so the stem can no longer draw water.
Das Beste ist nach wie vor
The best solution is the good old gardener's knife. Pulling the sharp blade across the stem will create a clean cutting area, leaving the delicate conduits intact.
Dann bleiben diese feinen Leitungsbahnen unverletzt und können das Wasser.
This is how the peace rose was made to last for an entire week. At the Europe Rosarium near Leipzig, Germany, the entire history of rose breeding has come alive. This is the world's largest collection of rose breeds. All roses of breeding relevance are being preserved in this garden. The billions of blossoms of more than 30,000 rose breeds harvested each year across the globe are an apt expression of mankind's love of roses. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's Little Prince put it in words. Men breed 5,000 roses in one and the same garden. Yet this isn't where they find what they're looking for. What they're looking for, they can find in a single rose. Artist Lisa Klein loves painting roses. The flare effect on her peace rose is a crowning touch, a literal coronation. This is the Queen of Flowers.